Hello crafty people, it's Sharon here, and today I thought I'd come back and do something that I haven't done in a little while, which is a lovely inky background and using some of my Lavinia stamps. So I thought I'd create this twilight scene or midnight scene, I don't know, late at night anyway, with a little owl and lots of stamping that you can use, either the same stamps or similar stamps that you've got. I'm using a fair few stamps on this one just to get lots of different texture and background, so I'll go over the stamps as we go rather than going over everything at the beginning. But basically I'm making a 5x7 card, and I've cut myself a piece of white card which I'm just going to bring in now. Here we go. And I am for the first time trying out Pink Frog Crafts smooth card, and I have to say I'm really enjoying using it. So this is my second time of using it, and we'll see how it goes. But it really is beautifully smooth. I don't think it can take too much water, but it's good for this kind of technique when you're not actually flooding the paper with water. So I'm going to use this again today, and we're going to get started. So you'll have noticed from my main card that I have got a very big moon here as a focal point, and to create that I'm going to use a mask. The mask I've got is a plasticky mask from Clarity Stamps, but you could use any mask that you've got, or you could die cut a circle that suits your own preference and just place it on board like that. I'm going to make the majority of my background with my Distress Oxides, and I'm going to start off with my lightest colour to create a glow around the moon. And for that I'm going to use tumbled glass, which is a very pale sort of blue. I'm using blending sponges today for the background so that I can get plenty of ink down without having to sort of spend too much time doing it. So I'm rubbing into my ink pad, and then I'm going to start on my actual mask, and I'm going to blend outwards, and I'm not really applying very much pressure. Well, no pressure at all really, because I'm just getting a basic amount down, and then I can go back in and add more if I want to increase that strength a bit. And I'm just going around and around that moon, and you can go out as far as you like really. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth either, because we're going to be putting a lot of interesting things on top of this, and so we won't be looking necessarily to see if we've got this perfect blend going on. Now the moon is going to shine downwards, so I'm going to bring that pale colour down further into the middle of my card. Just like so. And when I think I've got enough, I'll move on to my next colour, which is my next darkest colour, and that's going to be Salty Ocean, also in a Distress Oxide. And I'm just going to swap to a new blending brush for that, sponge, sorry, because I want to try and keep my light sponge light. And then I'm going to grab myself a piece of spare card just so that I don't get fingerprints on everything. I'm going to start moving around and working in from the edge, and you can see hopefully that this colour is slightly darker, but I'm trying to make sure that I do leave some of that pale blue colour in the middle. And in order to control this better, it is good to be able to move your card around, and you'll notice that I'm actually blending on a glass mat, which means I get a nice smooth start to my blending, and I'm always starting outside of my card so that I avoid getting a splodge in the middle of my card. Now this one I'm going to go all the way around and cover the whole piece of card just a little bit, not going in super deep, but I am going to give it a coating all over. And that's because when I start to add my other colours, they're going to merge and blend all together. Just come around the side here. Okay, and that's good for that one for now. And then I'm going to go back with my original blue, which was the tumbled glass, and I'm just going to bring that in a little bit more and blend out those edges. So I'm starting on my moon again and working my way out. If I want, I can start outside of the moon now because I've got my base colour down. And I don't know if you can see, it's quite subtle, but in doing that it does soften the edges between the old colour and the new colour, or the light and the dark. So it's a really nice thing to do. There we are. Now next I'm going to focus on the base area, which I want to make quite dark, and so I'm going to go in with a purple colour, and I'm going to use a Villainous Potion, also in Distress Oxide, and this is really quite a strong purple, but it goes really nicely with these blues and gives a feeling of darkness and shadow without actually having to go black or grey or dark brown, so it's nice. So I'm just going to dab in, and I'm just testing the water basically first of all and seeing how we go, and working from bottom to top. I'm starting to blend my ink in, and you can see that's making a lovely variation of colour. And the reason I go from bottom to top is I want the bottom to be darkest, and then I'm going to work up to a paler colour, and I'm just fading it out. Now if I feel like the line is too severe, I can actually go ahead and go back with my Mermaid Lagoon and blend it back a little bit. But I'm not going to be too concerned, to be fair, because I am going to be putting lots of interesting things over the top of this when I'm done. But what I might do is adjust some of my blue and just bring it up a little bit further, but we'll have a little look and see how it goes. And you'll notice the more ink I'm layering on, the easier it blends, because that ink's nice and wet and dark. So let's just bring that around. This is where we are now. If I feel like an area is a bit severe, that's a bit pointy, that corner, I can just go in and soften, add a little bit more. I've made like a imprint there, but I'm going to just brush over it and I'll soon have that disappeared. The shape of my brown, not my brown, I don't know what I'm talking about today, the shape of my round sponge. There we are. And I don't want my upward curves to be identical on each side. On this occasion it's ended up being slightly thicker and higher on the right hand side. Usually I tend to do it on the left, but actually this makes more sense because it's as if the moon's coming down like this, so that actually looks quite nice. Now before I move on, I'm just going to take a moment to wipe up with a slightly damp cloth all this ink underneath, because I don't want to get that everywhere where I don't want it. So I'm just going to give a quick spray on my cloth and a quick wipe just to get the worst of that away, and then we're ready to move on to our next colour, which is going to be a dark blue, and I've chosen Chipped Sapphire, still working in Distress Oxides here. And once again I've got another blending sponge. If you prefer, you can use brushes to do this, they also work. You just have to spend a little more time laying down the colour. They give a slightly softer effect, which is really nice if that's what you're kind of looking for. So this time I'm going to work on the top end of the sky, and again going from the corner I'm going to start to work my way around. And I'm trying to preserve once again the light aura around the moon, so you have to go a little bit careful because there's not much space there, to be fair. But I didn't want my moon to be dead in the middle, as you know, it doesn't always look the best when things are perfectly uniform and centralized. I think for a more natural look you want the moon to be off the side a little bit. So there we are, we've got a bit of a basic layer down. Now I'm going to go in and just go a little bit more, so I'm going to really give that a good rub. I'm just going to deepen that even more. And it looks a bit severe at the moment, but we will come back to that in a minute. I'm going to carry on working my way around, and I'm going to go in at the bottom end as well, just to give a little more depth. So that blue on top of the purple does give a little bit more depth. Hopefully you can see how that's going. And I'm not worried that I'm leaving brush marks and things at the moment, or sponge marks, because I'm going to go back through my lighter colours again just to smooth those out a little bit. So that's where we are now. Again, because I'm going to go towards the lighter colours now, I'm just going to get rid of this dark ink, because I want to preserve my lighter areas. So I'm going to go back to my, where is it, Villainous Potion, and just find my sponge for that colour, and I'm just going to go in and reiterate that purple colour on the bottom. And what that's going to do is just blend out the differentiation between the dark blue and the purple. And then I'm going to do the same. It's almost a bit like working with alcohol colour pens when you work from dark to light and then you blend one with the other. It's a similar sort of principle, but it's using inks this time. So I'm going with my blue, and I think somehow we'd managed to lose quite a lot of that, what's it called, I've forgotten, salty ocean, because look how bright it suddenly looks. So I'm just bringing that in, and I'm going to merge it across into my purple. The idea being that you kind of almost can't tell where one colour ends and another one begins. And then finally back to my palest colour, which is Tumbled Glass. And I'm just going to start smoothing all around. Now, I know that this doesn't look very dark at the moment, but we have got a few tricks up our sleeves which are going to change that. But meanwhile, I'm just trying to get that basic colour on, making sure I use my bit of card, because the more ink I put down on here, the more likely I am to leave fingerprints in the ink. So it's a really good idea to just use a little scrap of card just to make sure you're getting your fingers and no greasy prints on there. The next thing I'm going to do is to start to darken the edges just a little bit with a Distress ink. Now I'm thinking about this now, and actually I've changed my mind. I'm going to leave that till last, but what I am going to do is remove my moon, and you'll see that all of a sudden I have got a very bright white circle sitting in there, and I don't want it to be quite that solid. So I have got a little trick up my sleeve for this, and that's to use a brush type blending brush that you've used for either black or preferably grey, and with whatever's left on there, don't dip it into an ink pad unless you really need to, but just do some swirling motions around the edge. You'll see it's left a couple of little lines there, but it doesn't really matter. Just to provide, and I'm just going a tiny bit around the edge there, just to provide a little bit of a break from that solid white. And I'm really literally just lightly touching, and hopefully you can see that there's a grey mark on there, a grey shadow now. And we are going to add water later and splatter, which hopefully some of it will hit this area and create little crater effects as well, so it will actually look even better. So that's the basic inking done. It doesn't take too long really, it's just a case of going back and forth. We're now going to start to add some stamps, and my main stamps are going to be a branch, which I'll have to get out of the packet, which looks like this. And this for me is a really old stamp I've had since probably I started with doing Lavinia stamping, and you can tell by the packaging, but I do believe that this stamp is still available, or something very similar to it. If you want it, if you look up LAV 506 tree branch on the Lavinia site, hopefully you'll be able to find it. If not, you can probably find something very similar. And we're also going to use an owl, which comes from this set, and we're going to use this little guy here. Also, actually, this one would look magnificent in the moon, wouldn't it? But we are going to use the owl today. And this one is called Brodwin and Malin, and it's LAV 639. And I'm also going to bring in my stamping platform for this part, because I want to have a really good solid black silhouette for both of those two items. So I'm just going to get my stamping platform out and get set up with that, and then we'll be back to continue with the stamping. Okay, so I'm ready for action now with my stamping platform, and I've got my piece of card lined up in the centre of my platform, because I'm pretty sure that this branch, when I place it, is going to overlap off the edge of my piece of card. So I'm just giving myself a little bit of room to play around really and get that in the perfect position. What I want to do is have it so that my owl, when he comes in, is actually sitting in the silhouette of the moon. So I'm just going to work out roughly where I want that. The good thing about this is it's a rickety rackety branch. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to worry about it being straight or level. The nature of it is that it's going to go up and down and be a bit off tilt. And for my stamping of my images, I'm going to be using VersaFine Clair. So I'm starting off with Nocturne, because that's the black one. If you've got the old style VersaFine inks in the black base with a white lid, that works equally well. It's probably just the same stuff under a different brand name, but you can use that as well. So I've put my branch into place, and you can't see because I'm just off camera. I don't want to knock the camera too much. I'm just inking up my stamp, and my VersaFine is well used. It probably is a little less juicy than it used to be, so I might need to do a couple of stamps, and that's why I've brought my stamp platform in, so that I can have the opportunity to do that if I need to. That being said, branches are textured, so if it doesn't come out perfect, it's not really a problem. But a good tip when you're using VersaFine ink is just to leave the stamp sitting there for a moment to really give that ink a chance to absorb into the paper beneath it. My stamp's quite sticky for some reason. There we go. I think that will do just fine. So I'm going to get that stamp away, and then I'm going to bring in my owl and sit him somewhere on the branch. I'm just going to move my magnets out of the way so that I've got a good chance of placing my owl, but I just couldn't resist for a second just bringing the owl in flight in. He looks pretty good, doesn't he, flying there as well. So he's another option that you could use with this exact same scene really, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to stick with the one we started with. So here comes my little owl, and the important thing with placing him is that we kind of want to make sure that his claws are going around the branch as much as possible. So you just need to look a little bit closely, make sure his claws are over the branch so that he doesn't look like he's just sort of hovering in the middle of nowhere. And then we'll pick him up, ready to go again. And conveniently, he's pretty much going to cover one of my smudges there. I'm just inking him up with my VersaFine once again. And let's give him a stamp down. And just let him settle for a bit. I love his little eyes with the little white rims around them. It really does look like the beady eyes of an owl staring at you in the dark. Now, I'm trying to just hold my card down just in case. Yeah, I think he needs another little stamp. So because my stamp seems quite sticky and it was actually pulling up my card a little bit despite the magnets, I just got hold of my tweezers and just sort of carefully poked them in to try and hold the card in place while I lifted this stamp up. And this is stamp number 2. So let's lift him up. This should be fine, but there we go. And now we have a lovely solid owl sitting with his claws on the branch. For the rest of the stamping, I want to be able to move my card around freely and to stamp multiple times. So I'm going to swap from my stamping platform and I'm going to stamp freehand using acrylic blocks. So I'm just going to get rid of this now. So I've got rid of my stamping platform, but now I'm left with a very solid surface underneath in the form of my glass mat. So I want to create a little bit of cushioning which will help me get a nice stamp with my other stamps. And to do that, I'm just going to grab some old copy paper and put it underneath, which just gives a little bit of give, if you like, so that you can get a better stamp when you're applying your stamps direct. And now we're going to start building the frame all around our main character. And to start with, I'm going to use a dangly stamp, which is this one here. I guess it could be an upright stamp as well, but I always tend to use it as a dangly stamp. The beautiful thing about Lavinia is that if you don't have this exact stamp, you can just use what you've got. It doesn't have to be an exact formula. You just want something that's going to dangle from the top. So you could use a Lavinia stamp or any other stamp that you might have that fits the bill. If you want to check out this particular stamp, it is called Fairy Bonnet Set LAV 612. And for this stamp, I'm going to swap over to an acrylic block, which I have here. And I'm going to use a different colour of VersaFine Clair, and I'm going with Monarch this time. Now when I'm doing dangly things, I can't even get the lid off, there we are, I find it easier to put my card to the side so that I'm holding lengthways. That differs for everybody. That's just my choice. So that's what I say about having the freedom to move your card around so that you can put it in a position. You might want it at a slight angle, you might want it upside down. You can do whichever way you want. So I'm going to start by inking up my flowers in a lovely vibrant purple, which is meant to mirror the ground. And I'm going to apply my first set of flowers to the edge of my picture on the right, and I'm going to make sure that they actually go over the edge. I don't want it hanging in the middle without any sort of context, if you like. So this makes it look as if what we're seeing is only part of the picture, and it's obviously carrying on beyond what our eyes can see. There we have it. And then I'm going to ink up again, but not the whole thing this time. And using the same stamp, I'm going to bring in another layer. And I'm just kind of positioning it so that They don't overlap too much, and I want it to be slightly higher. I think that will look quite nice. And then just lift. And there we have the beginnings of our stamping frame. And now I'm going to swap to another stamp. And this again is one of my oldest stamps, but I'm pretty sure this or something very similar to it is still available. It's so old it doesn't even have a name on it, but you basically want a bushy leafy kind of a stamp. So I'm going to get that out and place it on my acrylic pad once again, and then we're going to start to fill in the other side. Once again, coming in with my black ink pad, or you could use a green or a brown if you preferred. It's, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. I'm trying to make sure I don't accidentally drop my ink pad onto my piece of work, so I'm sorry that this is actually sort of off camera, but what I'm doing is tapping my ink pad onto my stamp. And first thing I'm going to do is get my first branches in that go towards my purple part that I've just done, and I want to make sure that overlaps the moon, so I'm just positioning it and pressing down, and that's the beginning of my corner. And then I'm going to start to work my way around and down towards the bottom. So I'm going to re-ink once again, and this time I'm going to kind of create a jigsaw puzzle and place my stamp to create a corner, and I'm just twisting and turning just to get a feel for where I want it to be. And it doesn't matter if these overlap each other because it's a silhouette, so it's going to look more natural if things overlap a little bit than if they're all like separate stamps and all separated by, you know, blue space in this case. And then I have another stamp, and I'm going to start to bring it down. And everyone's going to come out different, to be fair. You know, you can't place everything in exactly the same place. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is some second generation stamping. And what that means is that I'm going to ink up my stamp as usual. I'm going to stamp once on some scrap paper to get rid of the excess, and then I'm going to use what's left to just add extra leaves in the background, and it will look like they're more in the distance because it's a faded impression. Can you see there? Now you could do this by using a grey ink if you wanted to, but this is a really effective way of fading out the same colour that you've already got. So I'm just pressing in, and let's have some down here, and I might put a few up in the corner here as well. Stamping off, just put a few up here, just touching very lightly. And a few up here. There we are. I think that will do quite nicely. And now I'm ready to move to the bottom end of my frame. So I'm just going to remove my stamp and get ready for the next one. Here's my next stamp. And there are two stamps within this, a larger and a smaller. This one is called Mushroom Lantern Set LAV 596. But again, anything that sort of works in an upward direction and looks a little bit florally or puffy, could be other mushrooms, could be flowers, whatever you like, will work for this. I'm going to go back to my purple now, which is going to give a subtle purple colour over and above the purple that I've put down with my inks. And taking the largest one, I'm going to first of all place one on the right hand side, and once again I'm just tipping it over the edge of my page so it doesn't look like it's just sitting in the middle. It looks like the scene continues on beyond what our eyes can see. Re-inking, I'm going to turn and put another one in at a slight angle, and then I'm going to move to the other side, and again I don't want to mirror this exactly, so this time I'm going to do shorter, and this one's not going over the edge because we've kind of got our leaves and everything coming down that side, so that makes it a little bit different. I'm just going to have another one just in there like that. So we've done exactly the same stamp, but just putting it at different angles makes it look not so uniform. We're ready to move on to the next stamp, and again you can use as few or as you know, you can really go to town and just grab everything you've got, or you can just stick to a limited few items. It really doesn't matter too much. My next stamp is another complete workhorse for me. It's again right from the originals, as you can tell from the packaging. I haven't got the name of it, but there are very similar stamps, if not the same, still in the shop, just like always. And this one is quite nice because it has a hollow version and a solid version of the same stamp. So I'm going to go with the solid version. If you wanted to add colour, you could use the hollow version and colour in those little pods with you know, pencils or whatever you've got to hand really. But I'm going to use this solid one, and I'm going to go back to my black, and I'm going to fill in some of the gaps with this stamp. So once again I'm stamping up my image. If it doesn't come out solid black, actually so much the better. I think this has got little delicate texture in it, to be fair, which makes it look a little bit more round, which is just what we want. Now I'm going to just place my pods and get my first stamp in. And it doesn't matter if it's overlapping my other stamps, because, you know, in the forest that's what happens, isn't it? Everything doesn't line up in a row. It's all overlapping and crisscrossing. So I'm going to use exactly the same stamp, and I'm just creating a rounded curve, adding to that curve that we created when we very originally started inking. And crisscrossing and going this way and that, and I'm going to fill in this area on the side with some more, and then I'm going to start filling in down below with a few extras, just touching the bottom. And that one didn't come out perfect, but it really doesn't matter, you're not going to notice it. And because we're going at all different angles and things, I don't think anybody's going to really realise that you're using the exact same stamp to do this. There. Now I want to add a bit more depth again, so I'm going to go back to my second generation stamping, and my tip for this is always to ink your stamp up completely before you start doing that stamping, so that you've got a nice smooth surface, and then you can just touch and start adding a few in the distance. There we go. And if you want to do a few more, you can. I might just put some on the edges just to add some depth. There we are. And so all of a sudden this is all filling up now, and we're looking through a gap in the foliage to see this beautiful owl sitting on the branch in the distance. I do feel as though my moon is not looking quite so grey now, so I'm just going to quickly go back in, just deepen that a little bit. And you probably can't see the difference on the camera, but for me it just adds a little bit extra. And now we're going to my very last stamp, and I'm going to go back to my purple again. And this one is a little grass. It's so delicate. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's called Orchard Grass, LAV672. And this is just perfect for filling in areas and making things look a little bit more like they've got depth and dimension. And because this is a smaller stamp, I'm going to just swap from my bigger acrylic block, and I'm going to go for my little round one. I've got here, and I like this one because it has little grooves around the edges, which means you can get a really good grip on it and you can twist and turn it. I got mine off of Amazon again, just for a change, very cheaply, so have a look on there if you like the looks of that. I would say it's about 3 inches in diameter. Right, let's go back to my purple, and once again we're going to go with the second generation stamping. I want this to look like these grasses are just blowing in the distance. So I'm stamping off, and then I also, by doing that, I don't have to worry about what's happening with the base of my stamp, whether there's a harsh line at the bottom, because I've blotted most of it away, so you're not going to really see that. There we go. So I've just added extra grass just for impact. Maybe I'll just do one down there. There we go. Beautiful. So we're done with our stamping now. We're going to do a tiny little bit of colouring and adding a little bit of extra ink just for extra darkness impact. A lovely trick which I'll show you in a moment. And then we will pretty much be done. First thing I want to do though is I do want to get some more texture in here, so I'm going to add some water splatter. Now you can do this before you do your stamping if you like. I quite like to do it after because I can kind of direct the splatter where I want it to be. So I'm just using some plain water and a fan brush, and I'm going to just take my water and tap. And I want to make sure I get some on that moon as well. In fact, I might just go for some bigger blobs on the moon. And I'm just going to let that settle for a second. And it will bleach out the ink that's on there. Then I'm going to bring in some kitchen roll. I'm just going to place it over the top and blot to lift up that excess water and the ink that it's taken away with it. And when we lift up, we're left with little ethereal spots. I don't know if you can see them very well. And I might just put some more on the bottom here. Obviously spots show better on the darker areas. So you can go ahead and add more, but you just need to make sure that your paper is dry before you move on to your next step. There we go. Now we've got some really strong looking splatter. My next step is just going to be to add a little bit of colour and depth to some of the see-through areas of my stamps, and to do that I'm going to use an alcohol pen in this case. Sorry, not an alcohol pen, an aqua pen, and I'm going to add some colour just here and there without doing lots of heavy colouring, heavy duty colouring, just to give a tint of colour to bring these items out. So I've just swapped pens because I realised I picked up an alcohol pen by mistake. So I've picked up one of my aqua pens in sort of lilac and those sort of colours. It really doesn't matter really too much what you're going to use, but we're just going to add a little bit of a tint, and this will work well over the VersaFine that we've already used. And as you can see, I'm literally just colouring in, and I'm not being too careful about it. I'm leaving white areas, but what you'll find is where there's ink underneath, it will also add its own tint and shade to these flowers, because watercolour by its nature is translucent, so it's going to take on some of the colour that's underneath it. I'm just swapping, but I don't think that's any darker, to be fair. So I've just added a little tint of colour. If you wanted to, you could add some darker colour as well. I'm just having a look to see if I've got anything handy. Okay, so I've got a bit of a purpley colour here, so I could add some extra if I want to. So I'm just adding some extra lines here and there just to give the impression of extra depth. No careful colouring whatsoever. And then I thought down here I would add some sparkly blue colour. So I've actually got a sparkle pen, and this is a Pentel Dual Metallic it's called, but it's basically a sparkle pen. And in these little funny mushroomy flowers, I'm just going to add little round C shapes here and there, the letter C, in the little round circles. So I'm not actually colouring them in full. I'm just giving an indication of colour. And what that's going to do is add a little bit of differentiation, connecting back up to the blue that we see in the sky. And also, in this case, because it's a sparkle pen, a little bit of sparkle, which would be quite nice. And sometimes I'm just putting dots in. There we go. So hopefully, I don't know if you can see, we've got some little sparkly shine in there. And I'm also going to just bring that sparkle even more by just adding some random dots. I'm going to have some falling down from the flowers and coming up from the ground, as if there might be little glow moths, or I don't know really, it's just sparkle. And then I'm going to go with my white pen, and this is a Signo Uniball pen, and I'm going to add some highlights on these little black pods, as if the moon is shining down. And again, I'm not being too careful about this. I'll be honest, I'm not confident with doing the highlights except the most tiniest amount. So, you know, I keep it very simple. And I'll probably add some little bits into my flower balls as well. Just nearby to the blue sparkle. And we can add a little bit onto our bird, and if you move your finger over it immediately, you can smudge it as well, which just gives it a little bit of a softening. And actually, rather than drawing a line, I'm just doing a sort of a few dots here and there. And I'm going to do the same with my flowers. Just in the areas that are kind of pointing towards the moon, really. My pen sort of decided to dry up a little bit, so I'm just trying to reactivate it. I find that these pens work better if you store them with the nib down when you're not using them. That's just me though. I don't know if that's helps or not, but I think it helps me. Okay, so we've done most of what we need to do. The thing I want to do now is just make sure that it does look like we're in the dark. And so the final thing I'm going to do is going back to placing my card on the black mat. I'm going to come in with a regular distress ink, which is black soot, or if you don't want to go that dark, you can use a grey. I'm going with my brush, and what I'm going to do is start to create a vignette. So I'm going to go from the corners, just start brushing around very lightly, and then I'll go around to the other corner, and you can hardly see this, but the regular distress ink is more translucent. So again, you can bring it out even over to the pale colours, and as long as you keep it light, you will find that the real colour underneath will still shine through. But what it's doing is giving that look of a shadow. And hopefully you can begin to see already that it's looking darker around the edges. So I'm just working my way round, taking a little bit of time with it. And I may even just go across my moon a bit more as well. And I'm going to pay particular attention down the bottom because I want that to be, you know, really quite dark. And all of a sudden our picture has been cast into darkness, but the brightness of the moon is accentuated because it's brighter in the middle. So that is a really good trick to use when you are doing a nighttime scene, because what you actually need to do, the trick is you use nice bright colours and then you surround it with a dark colour, and that's when you get the pop of the image in the middle without it disappearing, and you still get that brain tells you that actually it's kind of dark out there. So the last thing to do is just to mat this onto a black piece of card and onto my final card. So I'll be back with that to show you the finished card in just a moment. So here we have our final card, matted and layered and ready to go. But before we finish, I couldn't resist one last little touch, which is to add a little bit of glitter glue. I just felt like it needed it. So I'm just going to dot some magical glitter all around, just for that extra little bit of magical sparkle. Who knows what little fantastical creatures could be lurking in this wood. And there we have our final card. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's quite a long video, but I wanted to show you straight from start to finish how you can create a beautiful scene like this using very simple techniques, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll come back and visit me again. Meanwhile, take care everybody, and I look forward to seeing with you and crafting with you again soon. Bye.